Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on this show range from theology, masculinity, stories, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom that they share. People such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Michael, why are we here?
Today we're doing a special for Veterans Day. We're going to discuss a movie that we all watched, but we'll introduce our guest, our brother-in-law, Jeff, retired Sergeant First Class. And Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Jeff. I am the Brothers Random's brother-in-law, which is an interesting thing to say. I did 13 years in the military. I married their younger sister, actually older sister.
Yeah.
And yeah, I confused because your younger sister actually came and visited us yesterday. So
there you go.
And we were married 16 years ago now. We dated for about 9 years before that. So it's been quite a while that we've known each other. And they've heard a lot of my military stories. And I'm actually honored that they would actually ask me on their podcast to discuss Veterans Day and veterans issues. And then a great movie that I really enjoyed lately, The Covenant.
And more specifically, it's called Guy Ritchie's The Covenant to distinguish it from other crappier movies that were called The Covenant. So anyway, we'll get to that later. Jeff, tell us a little bit about your military background. We are both admirers of the military. We never served. In fact, the only person in our family that did serve was our father. And you and him had an affinity for each other because he also served. I think it was paratrooper, wasn't he?
Yep, he was an airborne soldier. He never got deployed. He was just finishing up school as the war came to an end, and but he had some pretty good stories even then.
Yeah.
Your family has always been absolutely amazing to me as a veteran. Everybody in your family, from the top to the bottom, has had a big affinity for veterans and the military. So I've always appreciated that. It's been a long road. It's been interesting. Your dad and I sat a few times and had some long discussions about his military service, more so probably than any of you kids have actually had with him, because he was pretty close-lipped according to your sister about it.
He certainly was. I barely remember anything that he said about it. I do remember the story about getting caught above somebody's parachute once, which was maybe for another time. But that's a great story that I remember him talking about. Jeff, as far as you're concerned, and we really do appreciate your service. As far as you're concerned,
and coming on, like the honor,
and coming on, yes, the honor is ours.
I have no but.
So, but please do tell us like a little bit about it. You were a Ranger, is that correct?
So I never went to Ranger school. I had a very unique opportunity in the military to go direct to SF school. It was due to some circumstances when I was in Korea of getting hooked up during a thing in Team Spirit. I joined at 17, and I am old. I went in the military in 1985. And through a couple opportunities, ended up getting invited to go to SF school. So I went to the Q course, then went to the course, and then spent 19 months in San Antonio, Texas, going to medic school. Completed my 11 years of service after all of that, and then got out in 1997. Been fortunate enough, due to the training that the military gave me, to work in the civilian world, which to me is a big issue with the military. Is there are not a lot of jobs in the military that translate to a civilian life. Typically officers do, because they have their degrees, and then their degrees allow them to be in jobs that are very translatable. But your enlisted soldiers, your infantry, your mortarmen, your artillerymen, even Rangers have a hard time when they get out finding a legitimate job that translates well to their service. Security and police are two of the biggest, firefighters, of course. But other than that, there's not a lot of those direct jobs that go from the military into the civilian community.
So did you see the writing on the wall ahead of time where you're like, I need to get into something that is going to translate into civilian life?
Yes. Yeah, I did. When I originally went in, I went in as a artilleryman. I was a forward observer. And because I wanted to go fly helicopters, there's a transition there that's available called an ALO. They're the observers in the front of a helicopter that conduct indirect fires. Tried to get into that school. That was closed down at the time. And so through a weird happenstance, ended up getting to go to the Q course.
And you love this kind of work where you're stitching up stuff and you're the body,
absolutely.
the anatomy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it because I've heard you talk about it, and even though it's going over my head completely, I can tell that you have a passion for it because of the things that you say. So that's where you landed, and then basically from there transitioned into civilian life through that, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
Once I got out, the road was pretty short getting into a civilian job. I worked for a individual practice for almost 14 years. And then recently, about 6 years ago, became an independent. So there's many physicians that call me and say, hey, can you come work with me for these cases, or this week or 2 weeks? I have somebody on vacation. And gets me to travel all over the city and pretty much all over the state. I have a couple hospitals that are in rural areas that I go to every now and then.
And you listen to the Brothers Random while you're traveling, right?
I do, actually. I flip between you guys and Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson.
Awesome. Well, I guess we're in good company then. So you left, you said in 97, was that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would have only been about 2 or 3 years before you met up with our sister.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it was, I got out in 97. It was late in 97, moved up to that small community that you guys know up in Wyoming. And it was about 5 months into me being there that I met her.
Awesome. And that I remember specifically that because the first time I ever saw Gladiator, it was me, you, and my sister and Curtis was with us too.
Yeah, Curtis came too.
So that was a great experience. It's something that I put completely. It was the smaller theater that we went to, but it was awesome. It was a great movie. So that was 2000.
We actually talked about that just the other day. Our daughter, who's 14, we showed her the movie, and of course, fast forward thanks to digital technology in a couple parts, but Tricia actually related that was when the first time we saw that was with you guys.
Yeah. And it was great. I actually recently found the poster of Gladiator, the original poster, and that was a great find. I'm very pleased about that. So is there anything you wanted else to tell us about your service? Like, I mean, when you look back on your service, is it like the greatest time that you ever had, or do you have what are your feelings about your service?
I get that question quite a bit from people that I work with. There, in the medical community, it's pretty slim on the number of people that have served in the military. So a lot of times I get to ask that question, and I always tell people it was the greatest, worst time of my life. The things that we've talked about before, the camaraderie, the missions that you do, the people that you help, the foreign countries that you've been to, and the individuals that are there that need your help, and you show up and you do help them. The worst part is the fact that you have to do that job. You have to go out and tell someone you can no longer exist on this planet because of how you feel towards other people, is a difficult thing to do and a difficult thing to wrap your head around. And then seeing that after you do that is a difficult thing as well. So it's like I say, the best, worst time ever. I feel for, to throw a little bit of a nowadays spin on it. The conversation that's currently going on about the Palestinians and the Israelis. I feel for both sides. But there is a group that's been told for many, many years, no, just hold back, don't do this, don't do that. Even though they're getting crap handed to them on a daily and weekly basis. And I think we're going to see a conflict like we haven't seen in quite some time. And the repercussions of that are splashed across our 5 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, 7 o'clock news, our 24-hour news cycle. And that's used to sway people's opinions about something that you have to look back roughly 100 to 150 years to get a good idea of what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree. During your service, what were the conflicts that we were involved in? Can you specify which ones?
Just before I joined was Grenada. So I was in all the way up from the end of Grenada all the way through to the beginning of what I commonly call Gulf War II, or the War on Terror, the GWAT, as most people refer to it. So I all over pretty much Central and South America, and then quite a bit of North Africa were our areas of operation.
What was your relation with the Black Hawk Down incident?
So that we were direct support for that Ranger Battalion. We weren't involved in that operation that day, but we were put on as a QRF for evacuating them and their wounded out.
QRF for the layman?
Quick reaction force. That's okay. Individuals that are, you have your force that's actually directly involved in it, and then you have a force that's a secondary lay-on force that's utilized in most cases as if they're getting their asses handed to them. Those guys show up and either do the evacuation or enter the conflict to end the conflict.
Can you give us kind of a day in the life during some of these incidences, like just what not to like dig too deep, but like just kind of what were your responsibilities kind of
and
thing?
Maybe with that a little, maybe contrast that to how it was portrayed in the Covenant.
So the medic's job is basically to prepare and take care of the everyday soldier in his unit. In your line units, like your infantry and your ranger battalions, their medics will make contact with every single soldier every single morning and see, are they hurt? Are they injured? Do they have an illness? Do they need a treatment plan? Do they need ibuprofen, which we hand out like M&Ms? Do they have their mission ready, body ready to go? Meaning, are they going to be able to be in the fight and stay in the fight? Your special operations guys, there's so much that varies from day to day. That continuous contact with your soldiers, but a bigger portion of that is actually treating the local indigenous personnel. So when those guys were in Afghanistan, which I did not go to Afghanistan, those guys were in Afghanistan, a greater percentage of their time was taking care of the locals and winning hearts and minds through that action. And then if somebody needed a greater level of care, talking to their command structure to talk to the local tribe leader and say, hey, this guy has something that's beyond our scope of care here. We would love to transport him back to a cash unit or even a hospital like in Frankfurt, Germany, or someplace like that, so that they could be treated, and we will make sure that they get back to you. Did you
often make that call, Jeff? Or
was the medic makes that call all the time. They're basically in charge of creating that environment so that you can go to your command structure and say, this guy needs out, talk to this guy. I've already talked to headquarters. They're going to transport him if we can get permission to transport him. And a ton of your cash units were always treating either the local indigenous personnel or even the enemy combatants that were shot by the special operations teams. They spent a lot of time treating those people. One of the physicians I work with was in Iraq during a major portion of the push, and was at a cash unit. He's an orthopedic surgeon, but because there's only 2 surgeons, they become kind of the everything surgeon. And they said a greater percentage of the people he treated were the locals. They were not soldiers that were injured.
A little bit on that note, so you were very used to having people's life in your hands, essentially. And I'd like to ask about, because we get into the philosophical a lot, how important is life?
Life is the most important thing you can possibly have. It's the only thing that is easy to take and very, very difficult to get back. Philosophically, the idea that in the modern society we have made life so invaluable, starting from conception all the way up, which enters into a whole nother discussion, is very sad to me. And it's usually because most people haven't seen the end of life. As kids, we shelter, as parents, we shelter our kids away from that. We don't have them go visit grandma on the day that grandma dies. And that process, especially in the American society, is unique. Most societies, the Israelis, the Palestinians, a lot of African societies, the end days of someone is a very communal thing. So they see it as they grow up, and they understand how precious and how fleeting it is. And here in America, we tend to store people away. We put the old people in old folks' homes, or the people with memory issues. We have them in a memory facility until they dwindle down to a portion of, they're not really around people at that end stage. So we don't learn a lot about it. I have, through the 29 years of being in the medical industry, seen many, many people die in many, many ways. And it's never the same, but it's always as devastating to me when it happens. And so I have a pretty deep appreciation for how precious life is and how little energy currently we're putting into it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I hope that wasn't going too deep too quick.
No.
Michael, do you have any other questions before we try to get into the movie review?
I mean, in a sense, that's played out in this movie. You've got we can I guess we can start getting into it, but I should probably introduce the movie.
Real quick.
Let's get into it, and then we can talk about that life part.
Yeah, the life part. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant is a 2023 film that takes place during the Afghan war, with a local interpreter who risks his life to carry an injured sergeant across miles of grueling terrain. Now, that's just the first half of the movie. So there's 2 portions of this movie.
John, you have tallies approaching.
You still don't remember a thing?
I don't remember any of it.
I only remember the interpreter. Why you want this job?
I need the money.
Don't disappoint and turn out to be a pain in the ass.
No, not me, sir.
Money isn't the reason he wants this job.
The Taliban killed his son.
Stop the vehicle, Sergeant.
We don't want to go down this road.
You're out of your bounds, Ahmed. You're here to translate.
Actually, I'm here to interpret.
John, you have tallies approaching.
Well, I won't back down.
For 3 weeks, this family believed you were dead. We owe that man your life.
There wasn't enough for him to carry me across those mountains. Now he's hiding in a hole somewhere. I should be in that hole.
You could stand me up at the gates of hell.
Everything all right, John?
No, everything's not all right. There is a hook in me. Ahmed and his family are in trouble.
We can't intervene.
I am gonna have to get him out myself.
We are bringing Jeff on as the military expert who can kind of guide us through this movie review, because Michael and I, obviously we didn't serve, but we love war movies. And before we really get into this movie, I just want to say a couple things about the best war movies. And Jeff, you can give your list off the top of your head, but mine off the top of my head is Black Hawk Down, this, The Outpost, and probably Saving Private Ryan, as far as war movies are concerned, and The Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne. Michael, what would be yours?
I haven't seen The Outpost. I'm not sure what that show.
That's a great one. You got to check it out.
I would, and it's not a movie, but in there. So yeah, it's probably similar. Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, but the Band of Brothers.
Oh yeah, the show,
HBO series that they did. What I seriously thought was, I watched it when I was young. I was probably 19 or 20 when I first saw it, and then I just recently went through it again. And I was talking to a guy, and he was talking about how middle-aged men, the acceptable thing is to become a World War II connoisseur.
100%.
And I asked him if he had seen the Band of Brothers, and he hadn't. And I was like, check your man card. Go see and see
that movie,
Band of Brothers.
That was a great show. I watched it. I ended up watching it with Cody, like the entire thing. We binge watched it together. So that was years ago, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. So Jeff, how about you? Jeff, what are your favorites?
So I will have to agree with Michael. My number one is Band of Brothers. If I am homesick for a day or two, I will watch the whole series over and over again. Fortunate enough to meet a couple of the guys from that movie, as well as the original characters. The World War II memorial, when it was dedicated, I was in DC for that, and there were some guys there that were from Easy Company, and met them and got some autographs. And then when the movie came out, watched the series, I'm a big collector of autographs, so I've had a couple opportunities to actually get some autographs from those guys. So one that you didn't mention, and it's a good one for me, is The Thin Red Line. It doesn't get a lot of airplay, but it's a great movie.
It's very methodical and very slow. It's very deliberately slow. So I do remember it being very, like, the shots in that movie are beautiful. That's what I remember.
Caviezel is in that.
Jim Caviezel's in that. Yeah,
Jim Caviezel's in it. Yep.
Yeah, he's
very young. Jim Caviezel.
Yeah. I like that guy a lot. Oh, and I should also mention my poster too, the Inglourious Bastards. Even though
I saw it.
Even though it's not a real movie, but
I was going there. Story. That's where I was going. I love Inglourious Bastards. It's so funny to watch because as having been in the military, there are things that happen there that I can absolutely 100% identify with. It's hilarious to watch. Platoon was out when I was in high school, so that's one of my favorites. Red Dawn, Red Dawn. I consider a military movie.
Yeah, that's great.
The first one, not the second one. And
the Patrick Swayze one,
where we get an Australian to play the epitome of the American man.
Yeah, from Colorado.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my rundown. I have watched Black Hawk Down twice, and knowing some of the characters in that movie, it hits really too close to home for me. And your sister has actually forbidden me from watching it. She came home one day, and I was halfway through it, and I was cleaning firearms and drinking whiskey. So so she said, "You're not allowed to watch this anymore."
Oh, it's so well done though. I really love that movie. It is a great movie. So, and I can appreciate her telling you not to watch it anymore. So, did you ever see this Pacific? Did you ever watch that?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Probably not as good
Yep.
as Band of Brothers, but very well done. I thought that was very well done.
And the new Midway is, I think, even better than the original. I know a lot of people are originalists in that, but the new Midway movie is actually fantastic. I will, whenever I flipping through channels and that's on, I'll sit and watch it for a good time too.
That's the new one with Dennis Quaid, right?
Yep.
I haven't seen that one. I gotta
It's
watch
really
that
good.
one. Yeah. All right.
I was thinking Dunkirk, because Dunkirk was the one where they came from different angles,
that's a good one.
different timelines, and had it connect together.
You know, another good one is not to get too down a rabbit hole, but 1917.
Or I was just going to actually bring that up because you, as you know, your background in cinematography, that's an amazing movie.
Yeah,
it's amazingly well done.
The way they were able to shoot it, it's so just going. You're just mind. So there's a couple of wonders in this that I want to get to. In the Covenant, so we should talk about that. So let's get into the movie. Initial thoughts. Love the movie. Think it's probably the best thing that Guy Ritchie has done in a long time, and I actually liked Wrath of Man. I
loved Arthur,
and you loved Arthur, yes. And I don't like his Disney stuff. I don't like it. He did Aladdin, I think one other Disney movie, and I'm like, no, not for me. But I think he did that so he could make these kinds of movies.
But do you blame him or do you blame Disney? Because I know
I blame Disney. Yeah. He's a gun for hire. He's a gun for hire for that.
They were looking for a name.
Yep. When he writes his own stuff, it's always good. And Snatch is a near perfect film. If you get the chance to see Snatch, audience, that is a badass movie. And Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is in the same vein.
I love Snatch, but I hate having to translate for your sister.
Just put it on the subtitles, man.
That's exactly what I do. It's like, she's like, what did he say? He wants a caravan.
Dogs. And that's what I said. Dogs. I said dogs.
Was that Brad Pitt that was doing that? Brad Pitt did such a good job.
So the story, a little background. So the story is that Brad Pitt saw Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which isn't Guy Ritchie's first film, but it's the one that put him on the map. And he saw it, and he went, I want to be in anything you're in. And he was a big name at the time. And so Guy Ritchie asked him, how would you like to be somebody that nobody can understand? And he was like, I'm game. I'm totally game. And that's where Snatch comes in. And that's a great, great movie. So he's hit or miss for me, Guy Ritchie. He's hit or miss. I remember not really liking Arthur, but Michael, you've told me to rewatch it and watch it with a different set of glasses. And I might do that.
Yeah. You got to watch it with the it's a movie that you watch in a different way than you watch other movies. That's the best way I can put it. It's all symbolism. That's all the movie
a lot
is.
Of symbolism in it.
And that's it. And so anyway,
we can get into the symbolism in this movie. Jeff, what were some of your comments on that?
Oh, I haven't seen Arthur. I saw the ads for it, and it was one of those that was probably at the time there was something else I wanted to see. And with the amount of time that I'm working these days, it's just really tough to get away to see a different movie. So I'll have to take a look at it.
Michael, your initial thoughts on The Covenant?
The Covenant. I loved how this movie is broke up in two parts. And that's it. Like I thought that was brilliant. I figured that there would be that the story of his first the character that's
John. There's John and Ahmed.
The story of Ahmed saving John's life would be the first 20 minutes, and then the rest of the movie would all be about
John, a movie by itself, a complete movie by itself.
But I actually, once I realized that you're settling in for a long first part and a long second part, I was game. Like I was just like, okay, this is how this is going, and this is great. And so I loved that. I loved the underlying themes of this film. Ultimately, the underlying theme, I felt like, and you guys can tell me what your thought, but was the contracts that men have with each other,
the bond that men have,
the bond. Yeah. And it's played throughout. You see it, and it's only sometimes it's just hinted at in little ways here and there throughout, but loved that. And so those are some of my initial thoughts before we get into things like spoilers. Go ahead, Jeff, your thoughts on
the bond that guys have, and that social contract that Terps had with their soldiers was always explained to me as kind of this dual line between them. Is you had to trust this guy with your life, but there was a whole portion of his life that you didn't really understand or know what he was. And it was played out really well in this, where Ahmed was actually part of the Taliban beforehand. You don't find that till later in the movie, but he did a really good job of playing that undertone of I'm trustable, but not 100%. And you'll figure out why later on. That's a big thing in the military, of you really don't know a guy's whole life until you've known him for quite some time. Guys that are in your unit, you find those things out piece by piece by piece. It isn't like you all sit down around a coffee table for 6 hours and say, so I was born, and then I went to middle school, and then you learn these things over the years from being around them.
That's pointed out in Saving Private Ryan, for the fact that no one knew what his occupation was till towards
and it was so interesting.
The movie,
that was such an interesting thing too, because you never know where leadership comes from in times of difficulty. You could be completely underrated person and then come in and be one of the best leaders that you've ever had. That's such an interesting idea. Any other thoughts before we maybe get into spoilers?
Not for me.
Okay. Well,
love spoilers.
We're doing spoilers now. I would like to say that one of the great things about this film, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but this is a directorial flair. So Guy Ritchie pulls in slowly every time they're about to get really close to each other. They're about to give something away about themselves, or too much away about themselves. He pulls in slow, and then they stop, and it pulls out quick. And it does this every single time until the end. When he brings him back, he gets on the plane. They're both sitting there. They're looking at each other. They have this bond, and it pulls in, and it stops, and it doesn't go back. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's almost like he's telling us, you're not fully involved or invested in this person until you've sacrificed something for them. And it was just an interesting, and I noticed it all throughout the movie. So they don't, when they're sitting there talking to each other initially, and he tells them, don't do that ever again. Don't undermine my authority again. And then he says, good job. And this is what happens with men. So Michael, you've worked with men, not in like intense situations like this. I mean, although they were somewhat dangerous, the oil field is dangerous. But when you're working with guys, you tend to have these conflicts, and then the conflicts are resolved, and you don't bring up the conflicts again. And women are very different in this. They bring up the conflicts again and again and again. But men usually don't bring up this conflict again. Now, it doesn't always resolve itself, but when you're fighting with another dude, you can usually be done fighting with them, you can punch it out, go behind the tank, the frack tanks is what it was always said, and you'd punch it out, and then you'd be done. And then you're like, okay, we're good. And then you have this bond with each other that isn't written. It's a weird, you can't express it. And I never learned about that bond until I had left all these guys, because we all got laid off. And so we all left our job, but we were in that time frame, we had this bond as men, because we had a goal. We had, and I'm sure that this, I'm not 100% sure because I never worked in the military, but a lot of these guys were ex-military. Some of them were prison, just out of prison, but you get this bond between men that you don't normally get just in normal settings, like, going to PTO meetings and stuff like that. I don't know, Jeff, what did you think about that?
That the communication process for men is, as you stated, far different than it is for women. We're action animals. We're not, speaking animals. And 100%, I agree with that philosophy that go out behind the frack tanks, or, out behind the school or the parking lot, is a necessary method of communication. And it shows up in this movie, I think, a little bit, in that just the way he speaks to Ahmed about, don't you ever do that again, undermine me in front of them. I think Ahmed kind of got it. He, from what I understand from the guys that really delve deep into the Taliban psyche, I think Ritchie spoke to some of those guys and kind of got their philosophy on how communication is. In the Taliban, there is very, very loose command structure. But in our military, we have a very, very tight command structure. And even if you don't agree with your commander, you do it. And then later on, you say, hey, here's my issue I had with this, when you're offline. And I think that's what he was trying to get that point across. Also to him is, yeah, you've been with other operators, because he had been. Mm-hmm. This is my team, and you're going to deal with me on my team. You're not going to play outside the wire. And I think that was a really good scene. It was one of my favorites.
One of the things in this that is poignant is that, and I think Guy Ritchie was trying to show this when he showed John go in and speak with other military people, and they would have they liked each other. It was apparent that they liked each other. They were joking with each other, kind of thing. So they liked each other. Here's the thing. I don't ever actually get the vibe that John and Ahmed liked each other.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about liking each other. It was about the mutual respect and the covenant, or the contract, that bond that they had, that's really above liking each other. And maybe, Jeff, in your military experience, you could probably attest that.
Yeah, there is a, I don't care if you like me attitude. You still will do the mission, and you will do what I tell you to do. And then through that appreciation of, we've been to combat together, we've done operations together, we've served together for a period of time, then that mutual give and take actually comes into play. But it is a shared experience thing. You have to have shared, as we always used to say, a cup of coffee out of the same canteen cup.
Yeah.
To build that bond.
Yeah. And I experienced that in the oil field too, because it wasn't until we actually had some, tough times together that we could bond together. It was very interesting. And it's very interesting for somebody who's interested in psychology to set, because the guys that I was working with never would have analyzed it. They would never have thought about, like, what is this bond that I have with this man who I have nothing in common with. I barely like the guy, but I have this respect for the guy. I have this bond with this guy. We've gone through some shit together. They don't even know how to articulate it, probably. And I barely know how to articulate it, but this movie articulates it. This movie puts it on the table and lets you look at it and go, this is amazing. This is it's so great. It's such a great movie and a great character study about men and their bond.
Mm.
So
yeah, and to that, back to kind of the spoiler part, but
yeah,
Ahmed saves John, and I loved how drawn out it was. I actually enjoyed the fact that they were showing him literally just run into a bump, and how that almost was
breaks
the thing
him.
that just almost broke him. And then he picks up and keeps going with this, cart. He's got the cart, and he's trying to haul John around on this cart, and he hits a bump, and it just, everything falls apart, and you see him break down. But then he goes at it again and just keeps going to save this man's life.
Well, and that's kind of the philosophy that we're dealing with in society right now, is that we have these people telling them, keep going. There's this famous writer who posted above his office when he was writing. I can't remember the name of the writer, but it basically was an epitaph that basically stated, no one cares, keep going. And that's really the masculine ethos, right? Because then that's what Ahmed goes through at that moment, because he's struggling, and he's in this rut. And it's very philosophical, very much an idea about masculine life today in our society, because nobody cares. It's like that what it was, that Dax video, Jeff, that we saw, that we shared a bunch of times a couple of weeks ago, about what is it like to be a man?
The Father rap song,
with Darius Rucker is in it too. And it's perfect because it basically states your only value comes from what you bring into the home. And that's what men are dealing with. But in this instance, his whole thing is keep going. And that's pretty much the philosophy of now, is just keep going, especially when suicide is so high among basically men in our age group. So
you touched on it a little bit. He was, what I saw out of that scene was, he was stuck in that rut, and he was stuck in that rut, and he's stuck in that rut, and he got so dejected until he took a second and looked at it and just changed what he was doing just a little bit. He just turned that cart a little bit so he could go around that one spot, and that again allowed him to going back up the hill. And yet it was still the scene of him continuing to push up that hill. To me, that little scene was absolute genius. That is every single guy's life these days, is just trudging up the hill, keep going. Oh, you stopped, take a second, look at what it is, change it a little bit, change it a lot, and then drive forward. And the special forces, those guys these days have had amazing hills that they have had to climb up, and they just keep moving forward. And then they come back here, and like you said, they face a lot of issues that come out of that. And it's unfortunate, but it's been the play of every military guy for the last 200 years in the United States, at least. If I can bounce back to the scene where he is actually taken prisoner, almost, and then that scene filmed was probably one of the most accurate firefight scenes I've seen in a long time. They did a very good job. Whoever they got as their military expert did a fantastic job of shooting it from the vantage points of the individuals in it. It almost looked most of the time like you were in a first-person shooter game, but it was a live action video. And to me, that was probably one of the better scenes that have been shot with a combat scene in a very, very long time, because you didn't appear to be outside watching it occur. It appeared you were inside of the scene. So it was very well done.
You're talking about specifically the scene where he gets captured.
Yes.
Gyllenhaal's character, John, gets captured.
Yeah.
And he gets knocked in the head with a butt of a gun. Yeah. And it just rings his bell. And so you're saying all that entire scene leading up to that point?
Yeah, that was so when he's down in the trench line, he's having to fight his way up over top the trench and then back down inside. That is 100%. If anybody's ever been there, that's exactly what it looks like. Is you can't see the guy 30 yards from you until it's almost too late, and then you either shoot or be shot. And that scene is so well done.
I'm going to tell you a little anecdote that's going to blow your mind. They did not use real guns on this. They used airsoft guns on this because of the killing. So it looks even accurate, even though those guns. So audience members, if you don't know, usually in a film, they use a real gun with blanks. And recently, if you're living under a rock, Alec Baldwin, of all people, accidentally killed somebody on set when a real gun had a live round in it, and it killed somebody. Anyway, you can go look it up. There's tons of stuff about it. But Guy Ritchie did not want to experience that, especially since this movie has a bunch of guns in it. And so what he did is he's like, they're all going to be airsoft guns, and we're going to put in digital squibs, maybe some real squibs. I don't think they had any real squib. A squib is basically a small explosion to indicate basically a bullet coming at you or coming out of you or something like that. That's a squib. Anyway, continue on, Jeff. That's an excellent.
It was so well done. The modern airsoft. I mean, my daughter and I airsoft all the time, and you can't tell the difference. So they did a fantastic job in what they utilized. Absolutely a well done scene. Probably the most accurate I've seen in very, very, very long time.
Yeah. And Guy Ritchie uses slow motion in some of the best ways. That scene's intense right up until the point that he gets knocked in the head, and then slows down, way down, to indicate that he's actually losing consciousness at the same time. And it was really well done. I mean, I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't see this movie in theaters, because it would have helped it. It had a small budget, 55 million, according to what I read. And then they didn't make it back. It only made like 12 million in the box office, and which is unfortunate, because this is a great movie. This is probably one of the best war movies to come out. And tell me what you guys think about this. This is a huge fuck you to the Afghan pullout, the debacle of a pullout.
Egg on the face.
Egg on the face. Oh my gosh. And Guy Ritchie doesn't admit that this is a reaction to that, but it is. You can tell it is. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Especially the second act. I mean, that absolutely spoke so hard. Over here is a flag about the 13 that died on that day. And it is such a disservice to the military. I really like the fact that can't wait till you get into the scene about how a giant FU to the powers that be about leaving Terps, Americans. There's still Americans in Afghanistan right now, still, over a year after. So it's ridiculous.
Barry, let's just get into the second act. The second act is John gets out,
and then John
he goes home, and he realizes somebody tells him from the grapevine that Ahmed has built kind of a legend about himself because he saved this American's life, and he did it going through 100 miles. Was it 100 miles of through Taliban terrain. And now the Taliban throws him on their 10 most wanted list, and he's a wanted man, and he's in hiding, trying to just survive with his family. And when John finds that out, he tries to make calls. He is doing and you see him breaking up against the wall. So he gets in the rut, right?
Yeah, we talk
about that a little bit. You see him get into the rut where he's calling and calling. He's trying talk to people. He's knocking down doors. He's just trying to figure out how he can get Ahmed out, and breaking his head up against a brick wall and notice this, because this is back to Guy Ritchie and his symbolism, right?
Mm-hmm.
The man knows he needs to do something, but it's the woman that comes to him and says, remortgage the house. We're going to do this. Like, you need to go make this happen. So it's the woman that gives permission for him to go and do
this.
This
is a sign of a good woman, right? The sign of a good woman is, I see that you need to do this, and I'm going to support you in doing it. Not, hey, no, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to, as long as it's a good deed, sometimes women keep us from doing the bad deed. They go, no, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. So
that's actually a bit of a nod. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, to the Operation Pineapple was actually funded by a very wealthy individual whose wife said, you need to fund this. And that's the operations that occurred after that fateful day at the Afghanistan wall. There were ex-special operations guys, current special operations guys, that despite what the State Department said, no, don't go in, went in with private funding, private aircraft, and evacuated almost 400 people over the next month, and are still today. Operation Pineapple is still working today in Afghanistan trying to get people out.
Wow.
Is that connected at all to Glenn Beck and his operation? It was Operation Nazarene, I think, that went in and flew people out.
I don't know if there's any direct connection. I know that all of those organizations, there's about a half dozen of them currently that are operating over there, that are all privately funded. And I know they communicate back and forth. There's actual Kennedy is a really good one. He alludes to it a lot on some of the podcasts he's been on. But Operation Pineapple was actually funded by a very wealthy individual. People can look it up, whose wife said, "You need to spend some money and get these people out.
Get these people.
Do it. Wow. Do it. Go do it. Yeah.
Good for them. Jeez.
Interesting. So, that may actually have been a nod. Yeah, a tip of the hat to
that's
actual real life events.
When I was watching it, I was like, that's actually very interesting that they put her in that mode.
Interesting.
What do you guys think? Like, obviously everybody was for the pullout at some point, but the way that it was that we pulled out is wrong. And Hollywood seems to step in line with our Democratic politicians most often. How do you guys think that they got this movie made? Because this isn't your normal, like, this is definitely a fuck you to the Biden administration. I think that's definitely shows in this movie.
So I honestly think that they made this to fail. I think they took Guy Ritchie, as you said, who had quite a few not so great movies, gave it $55 million is nothing when you're talking about Hollywood movies. It's nothing. They threw some money at it, said, yeah, Guy, go make this movie. And I think they really wanted it to fail. And I think the best part of it is there is a strong community of individuals that have supported it in a time where that type of movie isn't well supported. So I think that they made it to fail on purpose. That's just my conspiracy. I'll get my aluminum foil and wrap it around my head in a minute here. But there are times when people make things just to either poke the bear or see how it's going to come out on the other side. The new Snow White, I think, was a balloon that was floated and died in a fiery Hindenburg death.
Yeah,
oh, goodness.
That's gonna be interesting when they actually do release it. But yeah, I would agree. I think what they were, I think it was small enough that they could get away with putting this kind of stuff in it, because, and they don't deliberately come right out and say it, but it kind of reminded me. So that in the 1920s, or I should say the 1930s, there was the Hays Code that was basically a censorship of movies. And there used to be these little what do you call them, like innuendos that they would say in movies that only adults would really get. And it was kind of like to indicate
bypass, so it could like get past
the censorship. Yeah. And it feels, this movie feels very much like they're just bypassing, it's kind of under the radar of current Hollywood, because this is conservative movie that through and through. And we've only seen a few of them come out this year. Sound of Freedom is a conservative movie, and they tried to get rid of that, and that's a massive hit. And it seems like that they tried to make this die, even though they have a huge star in Jake Gyllenhaal. It's like, I'm amazed that he's in this movie personally. Excuse me. And he gives an amazing performance. The hook
scene
monologue
where he talks about the hook.
He talks about the hook that's in him. I mean, oh my gosh, talk about just the best. I mean, I've only seen the guy do two movies that I really thought he was excellent in, and this is one of them. The other one's Nightcrawler. I don't know if either one of you have seen that movie, but it's that movie. He's amazing in that movie. But anyway, your thoughts on that there, Jeff? The hook.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the same way that you did as a hook. I watch movies for the entertainment value, and then when I get in military movies, there's that part of me, like in medical shows, where I'm like, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to do that. But that idea, to me, I can see where that would actually be a viable idea. And this is funny, this is my favorite Gyllenhaal movie. I haven't liked him in any movies that I've seen him in the past. I just don't find him appealing as an actor. That's just me. But he did play a very compelling character in this movie that I did learn to like probably about halfway through the movie, when he pulled his big boy pants on and said, I'm going to go back and get my turp.
Yeah. I have not liked him that much in the past, but I have to admit, Nightcrawler, like, he doesn't blink in that entire movie. It's amazing. It's an amazing performance. You hate that character, but that's just.
It's a horror movie?
No, well, yeah. It's about people who take pictures of crime scenes, and it's pretty much, yeah, you could call it a horror movie, I think. So, and he gives an amazing performance in it. So anyway, audience, when you get
on to he finds his rut where he has to push through. The woman tells him he has to do this. They refinance the house and they go do this. He gets over there, he finds him, and they, and it goes through all of these intense moments. I loved the scene. This was before John comes to get him, but the scene where Ahmed is getting his family out.
That's the one.
A guy walking him through getting out of the house.
That's the one I wanted to tell you guys about. That scene is shot in one shot, in one continuous take. That's what they call them, oneers. And it's a very, 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 very difficult to do when you're shooting on set. And it's meant to invoke intensity, complete and utter intensity. And that's one of the most intense moments, because the baby's crying.
Yep.
And, we're all fathers here, right? So we're just seeing ourselves in this particular situation where you've got somebody coming after you, you have children and a wife, and you've got to get them out. And it's all done in one take, and it's brilliant. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff, that scene?
So much like the previous scene, I like those oneers, as you called them, as, for me personally, they pull me into the scene as if I am part of that scene. And that's probably part of the intention. As we spoke earlier, 1917 did a bunch of those. And I love them when they're well placed, and this one was really well done. An evac situation is usually the most intense that you can be. If you're pulling wounded out, I mean, they can get worse, but they can't get much worse. But when you're taking out live individuals and you're cover fire for them, evacuating them to a vehicle, or even further yet to an aircraft, that's the most intense you can actually be, because it can only go wrong. Going right is they get on an airplane or a car and they're gone. But everything is a downside. Very rarely there's an upside. They were safe inside the building. We're going to make them less safe to hopefully make them more safe. And so those transitions are the most intense. And I like the intensity he put into that scene. It was actually very, very well done.
Yeah. That's interesting that those are the toughest evacs. That's interesting. I would imagine that, Murphy's Law is going to play a huge role in all of that.
Can go wrong, it will.
Yeah, and whatever can go wrong will. But
they get him. So John gets there. I kind of liked their exchange of when John gets there. When he what was the words that he said to him while he was fixing the car? Shoot,
he said, "You got too many dogs around here."
Yeah, because it was just one of the things he said to him back in towards the
early part of the movie. Yeah.
And for society that hates dogs, I mean, they don't like dogs. And for society that hates dogs, that's the weirdest thing about being over there, is you're like, you guys hate dogs, but there's dogs freaking everywhere.
Yeah. That's weird. Crazy. What a nice little touch to put into a movie like this.
I loved how he introduced John to his wife, and then it like dawned on his wife. Her expression was priceless.
Yeah.
He's here to get us. And
what do you think, to go back a little bit, what do you think the motivation of Ahmed is to save him? Because they mentioned that he has blue eyes, like Ahmed's son had blue eyes. And Ahmed's son, for those that don't know, it was killed earlier. They don't show it, but they talk about his son being killed by the Taliban. Do you think that maybe Gyllenhaal's character kind of reminded him of his son?
I think to some respect that's true. But what I think that was the most important portion of that, in my personal opinion, was when Gyllenhaal was hurt and Ahmed looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I will get you back to the airbase." That contractual thing that you make when you're a caretaker of someone that can't take for themselves is paramount. And I think that's, as a man, he was saying, either we're both getting back there or we're both going to be dead on the side of the road someplace. And that to me was why he did it, because he had made that verbal bond. Now, if he had a secondary motivation, that didn't come across in the movie to me. It was that primary motivation. And I think that if there had been a secondary motivation, it was because, oh, you look like my son, or you remind me of my brother, or this or that cheapens that bond.
Yeah.
And thus cheapens the secondary exchange, which is Gyllenhaal coming back to get him and his family out, even though he never said that to them.
Interesting.
And that to me was that this guy saved my life. This isn't a contract between me and him. This is a contract between me and me. This guy saved my life. I got to do what's right by me, which is go back there, get him and his family out. And if not, I'll be dead on the side of the road.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Hence the name, The Covenant, right?
Yeah.
It's about that contract. It's about that covenant, which and like I said, it alludes to every little bit. It will allude to that contract, that covenant, because John goes into his colonel, right? I believe he goes into his colonel.
Johnny Lee Miller is the actor.
12 years ago, I saved your life. Like, owe me this favor.
Yeah.
Do this for me. And he ends up getting Ahmed's visas for the family.
Yeah.
So I do think that is really what it's all about. It's in the name.
Yeah.
And the whole movie has many covenants in it. The one between him and the private military contractor, Kinley.
Oh yeah.
Was his name. who is actually loosely based on a real life person, I think. We can talk offline about him. The interesting thing to me was him and the colonel had that conversation of, I've saved your life, now you're going to get this for me, which is a covenant in itself, and that's that deal that we always make in the military. But you never hear really how he and Kinley know each other, because Kinley's private, he's still military. But at the end, and you'll allude to that later, Kinley's contract with him, his covenant, comes back in a big kind of way. And that is that bond that comes out of military brotherhood. So you're never told that they serve together, but you, from the little bits and pieces you get from them, you know that they have that other bond as well.
So what were you? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you almost hear it again at the end, and I don't know why, like how it played in, but it's in there somewhere where Kinley says to Ahmed, "If you need anything, look me up."
Yeah.
There was a moment there, and you're like, "Ooh, there it is again."
And I can guarantee you, any guy that's ever been in the teams or ever actually served in the military literally had a Woody at that point, because that is the exact same thing that everybody always says to each other. I've been out since 97, and I still have friends that if they called me tomorrow, I would be packing my B bag, loading a box of ammo, and moving out, because those are those contracts that last, till Valhalla, as we say.
Yeah. All your life. Yeah. That's great. It definitely evokes that camaraderie. And I don't know much about Guy Ritchie's history, but I mean, I don't think he served in the military, but he has this affinity, I think. And this movie definitely shows that affinity. And I mean, everybody knows that he was at one point married to Madonna, and we won't hold that against him. So
he was. I had no idea.
And
yeah, like you said, the end was great. How they had the pan to the two of them. Ahmed gives him a nod.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the end of it.
Yeah.
And then he lays back to sleep, to finally sleep, which alludes to something he said. He couldn't get any sleep.
He couldn't get any sleep
because that hook was in him. That the contract was pulling at him.
Yeah,
and he couldn't get any sleep. And so they're on the plane getting out.
I don't know how long Gyllenhaal stayed up, but he looked, when he went and was talking to the colonel, he looked like he'd had his ass handed to him about 3 times. I mean, that boy looked tired. And then that last scene was phenomenal. The C-130 coming in too was, I love spooky.
So the realism in that scene, I kind of question it. Are they that accurate, Jeff, that they could do that and also mess the people on the bridge or the dam?
So the 130 millimeter recoilless rifle that used to be in the Vietnam era has been replaced with a direct fire artillery piece. The forward looking infrared that is, and the cameras that are on that, we call them gee whiz cameras, because you look at the screen and you go, gee whiz, you can read my ID card at 1.5 miles in the air. They can put an artillery round in the front driver's seat or the front passenger seat if they want it. I mean, wow. They are that accurate. And knowing the burst radius of an artillery round or an air burst radius is, I mean, it is surgical what they can do with that aircraft.
Whoa. Because when I saw it, I was just going, I don't know how accurate that could be without them wiping out the people that they were trying to save. So that's amazing. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, like, how accurate are those? So that's amazing that is actually that accurate. Unbelievable.
One thing that the United States is really good at is spending money on equipment to be very accurate at killing people. I mean, look at what happened a couple of years ago with the terrorist leader in Afghanistan. They took basically a guided munition, and instead of saying we want it to blow up and destroy the whole car, they put 6 samurai swords on the side of it that pop out and go through the vehicle like a ginsu. And they saved the driver. He was in the passenger seat, and the driver got out of the vehicle. We are really, really good at putting lead on foreheads.
Good. That makes me feel a little bit better about it. So, the overall movie is so well done that I wanted to take a moment about the music in the movie. He's using the same composer that he used in the Wrath of Man, Christopher Benstead, and it's a lot of strings, and it definitely evokes this ethereal feeling, especially when they do slow motion. And he's very deliberate about his slow motion moments. So that most of the action is not taken in slow motion. It's mostly the character beats that are taken in slow motion, specifically when he gets knocked in the head and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought the soundtrack to The Wrath of Man was very good, and I thought this was excellent as well. You definitely feel through that the turmoil that Jake Gyllenhaal's character is going through, because he doesn't want to just leave this guy who saved his life there to be taken out. So I thought that was interesting. But that's all I have to really say about that. Anything there, Michael?
At the end, I was gonna say I didn't double check and look up the numbers, but at the very end, it talked about the pullout of Afghanistan, where 300 interpreters the day of, as soon as the Taliban took over, 300 of our interpreters that were helping us on a covenant, on a contract that we were going to have their backs, that 300 that day died. And then I think it said something about many more are like
in hiding,
unfound, or something to that effect. But that is the egg. I mean, the whole movie about that contract, about that covenant, and then the very end, it talks about the pull out of Afghanistan, which kind of goes to that egg on the face of that whole situation.
And that was like, as I said earlier, there's like 4 or 5 covenants. That to me, when they rolled that, that was the last covenant that I thought was the biggest issue that we face. Is we, as militaries, we go into these places and we say, hey, we need somebody that speaks local, and if you help us, we will take. This has been going on for 80, 90 years. When we were in Germany, for crying out loud, we did this. We found German locals and said, we'll take you and your family to America. And then the government pulls out and they don't do it. And that's why so many of these organizations work hard at doing that as well. There's still State Department individuals that are currently working to get interpreters that worked with us in Afghanistan still out of Afghanistan. It's estimated, the last number I saw was about 3 or 4 months ago. It's estimated there's about 1,700 that are still alive, that are still in hiding in Afghanistan, and are still waiting to be taken out by the U.S. State Department. Those visas are, I mean, they're so easy to do. Most of the time, the Special Operations has an individual that liaises with the U.S. State Department. It's been involved in a couple operations where when we evacuate people, literally they're sitting there
just doing that.
And, stamp,
and taking pictures and gluing pictures in passports and saying, get on the airplane. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, in my personal humble opinion, was the most botched withdrawal since we saw pictures and videos of helicopters on tops of hotels in Vietnam. It almost was identical. Instead of a helicopter, it was a KC-141 and a Stratolifter, if I remember correctly, and people standing on the outside of an aircraft trying to get the hell out of there. And so to have a verbal covenant or a contract with individuals who committed, years of their lives being interpreters, they were the one thing that stayed. Whenever a unit came in for a year and did the job, and then left, and another unit came in. The only thing that stayed the same was the turp.
Mm.
And so these guys dedicated, 5-10 years. We were there for 21 years. They made a paycheck, but they were also hunted on a daily basis. Most of them lived either just outside the wire of these posts that we had, or lived inside the wire, and their families still lived outside. So they were in constant fear. It's a sad state of affairs. And I'm glad that this movie brought a little bit of coverage to that and a little bit of awareness.
Yeah. We definitely need more like this. I mean, I can't really explain why this wasn't a hit. I'm kind of racking my brain trying. It came and went in movie theaters, and I'm just kind of racking my brain on to why.
So tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
The new contracts with movie theaters, that movies are in for 2 weeks and then released digitally now. Is it 2 weeks? I think
it has changed quite a few times, so I'm not exactly sure which, but you're probably right. It's probably 2 weeks.
At a time where people don't want to go to movie theaters, either fear of continued COVID or personal interaction that happens in movie theaters. I don't know. I don't think it had a really good play for advertising. Advertising for movies marketing has changed so much.
Yeah.
So much. I mean, we don't even watch TV anymore to see commercials.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I think back to when I was 11 years old and Star Wars came out. It was on every channel every night that you should go see this movie. You're seeing it now as an ad on your TikTok or your Instagram, and you're like, gone.
Yeah.
So
swipe. Yeah.
That's tough. And if you don't see an actor that you're overly enthused about, or a subject matter that you're overly enthused about, you and I talked about it, Jake Gyllenhaal, and a war movie, about Terps, that's why, it didn't get a lot of play. I think it got a bigger amount of play now that it's on pretty much everything you can see it on now. I know I saw it
streaming everywhere.
Yeah. And I think it's getting a much more play. One of the people I worked with last week actually mentioned that, because we were talking about doing this podcast, actually mentioned that they'd just seen it and they loved it. And he comes from the other side of the fence that I do, but he actually loved it as well. So it plays well with a big audience. I just don't think it got a lot of play as far as go see this movie because it's really good.
Yeah.
Where something you talked about earlier, The Sound of Freedom, because it was such a big deal to the news media, I think that's why it blew up, is that everybody went, oh, you don't like it? Then obviously I'm going to go like it. And they did.
Yeah. And that's another thing. The news media has become, they don't talk about the Afghan withdrawal anymore. You do not see about anything about this. Like what the information you just gave us about the withdrawal, about the different organizations involved in it, is more than I've learned from the news myself. So they're not interested in it. In fact, I mean, I've heard stories. I don't know even if they're true. If the Hamas attack on Israel, they were using our weapons that they got from Afghanistan. I don't know how true that is, but nobody's doing a story about it.
It's a theory out there, and until you pick up a couple weapons from a couple guys and then trace the serial numbers back to the DOD, which is pretty easy to do. And then it has to come out of the DOD that this is what was left in Afghanistan and then came over. I can look at an M4 that has a military stock to it and an ACOG and go, where would they get that? And
Yeah. So, but nobody's going to do that work because the egg on the face, and they're trying to avoid that egg on their face. So
I'm pretty sure they didn't order it from Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah, that's true.
We got an election coming up. Got to keep that stuff down.
Got to keep that stuff down.
And that's the other thing, is that, the lamestream media really is invested in JoJo the Talking Puppet.
Hard.
The Secret Service isn't worried about snipers taking out the president. They're worried about stairs taking out the president.
Stairs.
Yeah. Michael, do you have any final thoughts on the movie?
Final thoughts. I think So this is egg on the face of the American military, the politics, but I think it's a reminder that we need to uphold our covenants. We need to uphold our commitments, verbal or otherwise, right? Like written or otherwise. And also, I mean, I think it's a call to us in our personal lives as well to uphold those contracts. You know, men of honor. That honor means something, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something to be said for just where the state of affairs are, masculinity, it's toxic. You know, be honorable. And
then it's not, if you're an honorable person.
Yeah.
Jeff, what are your final thoughts on the movie?
Just to clarify for my military brothers who may see this, he said American military politics, not the American military.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Michael knows that the straight line soldier doesn't have anything to do with when to get out or how to get out. I absolutely agree. I agree that this was a great point to make. It makes a point very well that our withdrawal was unsatisfactory. It didn't do our allies any favor, didn't do us any favors. It showed very well the bonds that men have on the battlefield in many different respects. Those straight line bonds that are with the interpreters that are sometimes on both sides of the fence. The guys that you've served with, but nobody really knows you served with, and then those commanders that are over you that you can literally go to and say, yeah, you know the shit that I've done for you, so this is what you're going to do for me. And whether it's saving their life or saving their careers, that bond is still there, no matter how long it is. I think they did a really good job. I would definitely give it in the old vernacular 2 thumbs up. And it was a pleasure to watch it, and it's actually a pleasure to sit down with you two and to discuss it.
It's the pleasure's ours, Jeff. We're really appreciative of it. We're really appreciative of your service. Happy Veterans Day when this drops. We'll drop this just before Veterans Day. And we really appreciate that. We really appreciate everybody who has served in the military. We have nothing but utmost respect and love for them and their sacrifices, because they do not get talked about enough. They certainly don't. And we can't emphasize that enough. Please.
To that, Travis, let me add, Jeff, you mentioned getting autographs of some of the E Company members that were part of the band of brothers from HBO. I think that is admirable, right? I think we should put on a pedestal more those who serve to protect this country than the actors and actresses that, all the glamour and their trailers and, all those, all of that, upholding that to be our precipice, our top. I think that we need to uphold our veterans more
in that esteem. And
esteem. Yeah.
I second that. So
there one of the guys from Easy Company who just passed away recently, quoted when we were at the World War II Memorial dedication, was talking to one of his grandchildren. His grandchild said, "Grandpa, are you a hero?" And it's been played a bunch where he literally looked at I think it was his grandson and said, "No, but I served with some." And to me, that's kind of been my attitude all along, as far as what a true veteran is. When people say, "Hey, thank you for what you did," it's an odd thing to have people say that to you because you know what you did, but they have no idea. And to me, that is really nice that they come up and do that. But it also is one of those really embarrassing things where you don't know what to say. You don't go, "Oh, you're welcome," because they have no idea what you did in the military. There are some that didn't deploy, and they have a very deep guilt about saying, "Oh, you're welcome," or something like that. And they should never, ever, ever be guilty about that. Anybody that served, whether they served 20 minutes or 25 years, if they served honorably, they're still heroes. And all the way down to the cook, I can't deploy if I don't have food for my men. I can't, come back and treat people if I don't have a hospital in Grafenwehr, Germany that's willing to accept a patient that I send back to them. Everybody that served is a hero. And that to me is what Veterans Day is about. So if somebody says, "Thank you for your service," I always say, "Thank you for your support," because that's the big thing. It's the Americans that still continue on to provide the tax dollars to spend on the military so that we can do the job that we need to do around the world. And anybody that thinks we don't help when we deploy somewhere hasn't seen what the rest of the world is like. We live in the greatest country on this planet, always has been, always will be, because we do more in one day than most countries do in a year.
Amen to that. And on that note, we will wrap this up. Our social media, check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. Thank you guys for this.
Jeff, where can, I don't know if you have social media that you like to toss.
I typically don't. I do TikTok and Instagram, but I keep it to just my friends and a few lucky people. If you want to follow me on TikTok, I'm 18doc. That's about where I'll put most of this if we do some snippets on TikTok.
Yes, and we will definitely try doing that. I would also ask before you go, we're going to do just a quick round questions. I know we didn't warn you about this beforehand, but I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Favorite recent movie you watched, not the one we just watched.
Ooh, favorite recent movie I just watched. I really loved the new Avatar. It was really good. The second one, The Way of the Water.
The Way of Water.
Yeah, we recently upgraded our TV down in the basement at the Furnace Pub where I'm currently talking to you from, and it's a 5K super rated something or another OLED, and it is phenomenal to watch that on. I think that's probably about the best one I've watched in quite some time.
Favorite recent book you read, or just a book you'd like to throw out?
Great book. It is The Prisoner in His Palace. It's the story of the 13 soldiers that guarded Saddam Hussein from his capture until his execution. Great insight into the military mind, great insight into Saddam Hussein. He was vilified, but it gives a pretty good look into a couple of his other sides. And they're not just these soldiers' opinions. There's other people that are quoted in the book that, really looked at who he was and how he ended up being who he was. I often say you got the guy driving down the highway with road rage and everybody always wants to blame him. I'm like, well, maybe let's look at the 5 people that pissed him off and caused him to have road rage. And so it gives you a pretty good insight into his early life and where he came from to be who he was.
What do you think about Jordan Peterson? Last question.
Love JP. I wish we could clone him and keep him alive forever. His insight, his intellect, and the speed at which he just continues to grind through the issue and dissect them down to the very basic. JP is awesome. I can't wait till he's in the Denver area and I can actually go see him at a symposium or something.
Yeah, definitely do that. Michael and I did that last March, and that was so great.
I heard you guys had a great time.
We did. One of the best live experiences I've ever had. So, all right, we'll call that. Thank you again, Jeff. Audience members, keep listening, keep reading, keep watching, learn more. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
See ya.